We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is MJ Maurer. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm a partnerships manager at AllVoices. Today, I'm very excited to welcome our next guest onto the show, Lucas Wehle. He's a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist at Unitas and an LGBTQ plus and DEI consultant. Lucas, tell us about yourself, including your pronouns, and how did you answer this question when you were younger? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Yes, thank you, MJ. Thanks for having me. My name is Lucas. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I currently work as, like you said, the DEI specialist at Unitas. My background was specifically working in the LGBTQ plus community, really specifically in trans activism and advocacy, and creating resources that didn't exist in my hometown that when I came out about 12 years ago as a trans man. So that's the field I'm in now. When I was growing up, I actually wanted to be a doctor for the majority of my life, but that changed very quickly as I got older. I think probably around age 12 or 13, I became very passionate about working in, I guess, the field that you would now refer to as like accessibility. When I was a young kid, like in fifth grade, I was assigned to walk what the class was an ESE class, walk the kids to and from the bus. And I just fell in love with the kids and really became passionate about working with that community. So in middle school, high school, I became involved in Special Olympics. And from there, I ended up moving into to get a degree in what's called adaptive physical education. So that's what my degree's in. That's where I went, and kind of my passion that the field of passion that I was really wanting to get into before I came out as trans, and then kind of fell into that advocacy instead. So.
Absolutely. So, you then spent several years working directly with the trans community and connecting the community to a lot of those much needed resources and tools. What advice do you have for trans individuals who may be looking for more supportive personal resources today?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes, unfortunately, we have to be our own advocates. And, at the beginning of my transition, I very much had to do that, not only in my personal life with my family, and coming out and just struggling with facing rejection from them and from like my church community, but then in healthcare and finding just any resource related to my transition, and really at that point my gender identity affected everything, and any type of care or treatment or support that I needed, right? So I think now, we've come a long way, and in most places in the country, we do have, some communities and resources that exist. What I recommend, for people who are looking for resources, looking for support, is trying to reach out and finding those communities, because they can, there's usually an abundance of support and access to things if you find those. And nowadays, the easiest way to do that is like on social medias, on Facebook, things like that. There's usually I think there's either groups or forums. When I came out, I was not that involved on Facebook. I don't think that sort of thing really existed on Facebook. So I turned to YouTube actually for a lot of resources and support. And that's also still a good resource that you can turn to watch people's transition, get feedback, or hear people's experiences with different types of surgeries, if that's something that you might be looking into. And there's a lot of virtual support groups and stuff nowadays too, thanks to COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the magic of social media is often really in connecting a lot of these people and making sure that we don't feel so alone. And so I think that's really great advice in terms of finding those resources and looking for those places, and reminding yourself that you're not alone and you're not the first person to go through these sorts of things.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that at the beginning, I think, for most of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Shifting to kind of an organization perspective, what benefits and resources do you think organizations should be thinking about to better support their LGBTQIA and in particular trans or gender diverse employees?
Yeah, so there's a few things there, benefits wise, that really kind of encompasses the whole community, and can benefit many different identities. And one, it's kind of overarching is that something that a lot of people don't think about, and that's any type of like, I don't know what you'd call it, like familial support, as in like adoption, a support. We're actually talking about, I know we're having conversations about that at Unite Us, because, it's very difficult for, some people who cannot have their own child. And this can be for anybody, to afford adoption, or, if they're looking at in vitro, anything like that. So that's something that's kind of a newer, to my knowledge, like benefit that people, think about offering, that I think is really beneficial and can, like I said, go outside of your, LGBTQ plus employees as well, right? So a lot of people are affected by that. Specific to, transgender diverse individuals, a lot of companies might not know or might not understand the importance of the literal buy-in for certain benefit packages, because to my understanding, it is still in most places sometimes like a specific package, or a specific benefit that you have to opt into in some insurances. And there's kind of a fear here, like of an unknown, and then also like not understanding how much that might be needed. So on one hand, I in my experience, I found a lot of employers are kind of worried about like, oh, this is going to be a huge expense, when really you're probably gonna, if you're 1,000 people employer, you might have 3 people in your out of your entire employee basis that opt in to having like a gender confirmation surgery in their life, right? That's actually a very minimal cost, to have that option there. And then the other end is, I think, people not understanding how large of a community we are, right? And how much we need that access, and how challenging it can be on some plans to even get any gender, affirming care, even something, as lower cost as hormones, compared to, a major surgery. So that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not something that naturally comes up in the course of picking out your benefits plans, but it's something that organizations should be thinking critically about, making sure that they're asking those questions. How difficult is this going to be? And while you may not be alienating a ton of employees, you could accidentally alienate a few, and that can really affect you disproportionately over the long term.
Absolutely. And if possible, even like, trying to have an insurance that is trans-friendly, or is kind of known as that, because when you're navigating those things, a lot of times we have to interact with, the staff a lot. And most of the time when you're talking to insurance providers, they don't even know their own, benefits or how to navigate trans, related care. And that's really frustrating, because then it feels like we can't use those benefits or utilize, getting things covered. So.
Yeah, absolutely. The trans-friendly providers is hugely important, and something so simple that organizations can take a couple of extra minutes to look into when they're picking benefits.
Absolutely.
So in your role at Unite Us, you work hand in hand with employee resource groups and subcommittees daily. What are pitfalls organizations and ERG leaders should be aware of when planning their own ERGs?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things is making sure, especially if you're just starting out, which we're fairly new to having ERGs, we're coming up on having them for just a year. So what groups are necessary? Like what communities do you need to serve first? What's going to be the majority of the need? And so that's kind of how they picked our 6 ERGs. I wasn't on the team when those were picked. But also we're looking at expanding those out, and you kind of have to weigh in an issue we're kind of running into. You have to weigh in on, okay, so this is definitely a need. We know that there's a need for, an ERG for this community. How many members are going to utilize that ERG? Like, are they going to come, right? If we have 2-3 people in an ERG, it's still important, but are those people, able to have community then in that space, if only one comes that day, that sort of thing. So, you got to kind of work with that. I'd say there are some certain like legal things you have to look at. So for example, we've talked here, and something that I think would be really cool, but not really possible to do as an ERG, is support around like substance use, or people who are in recovery, which we're in full support of and think it would be great to have something like that. But unfortunately, we can't like offer some sort of like a support group or do anything like that legally. So we've always been in conversation about what we could do, right, to support that, or to have, a community that, can support each other internally. Otherwise, finding the right, people to lead, something I've found helps, because we really don't want to just be putting too much extra work on people who are volunteering as these co-leads, is we've increased the co-leads to 3 co-leads per group. And I found that has been very beneficial and very helpful for people to not feel as much pressure to attend this check-in meeting if they can't be there, right? If 2 other members are there, that's fantastic. Even if one co-lead is there, they can regroup with the other 2 co-leads and let them know what they missed. So ultimately, it's about not adding stress to their work. This is supposed to be a supportive, a positive aspect of their position here at Unite Us. And ultimately, we want them to have fun, with it as well. So those are kind of some of the main things that I've found and navigated through the past 5 or 6 months that I've been working with the ERGs.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to prioritize which ERGs you're looking for. You've got to give your co-leads a bit of a break, and then you've got to think critically about where can we, help and where can we not, and where might we be coming into some legal troubles. Sounds like an area as well where the ERG might be able to influence the organization to think critically about their benefits, and maybe what substance use benefits do we provide or encourage to our employees as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And our ERGs are also very involved. They work hand in hand with DEI, and they bring in speakers and workshops and host workshops, for specific causes and on specific topics that, go right along with our DEI initiatives. And so we like to partner with them in those ways and have them head those things, if it's their area of expertise or passion.
Yeah, absolutely. Having really, really involved ERGs can be very, very powerful to your DEI focused goals and your organization community as a whole. Zooming out a little bit and thinking about inclusive culture, in your experience with the different organizations that you've worked with, what is really important to ensure all employees at an organization feel like they are part of the culture?
Number one is, I cannot stress the importance of a DEI team, a DEI department. I worked at an organization in the past that literally had the word inclusive in its name and refused to have a DEI department. And to me, that was just wild, especially as an LGBTQ plus organization. And we often actually heard, in town halls with all staff, we heard from members, people of color that had been with the organization for a long time, that they themselves experienced things like racism, in our company, which we all kind of considered each other like family, and that was really upsetting. And I know it's true, and I experienced instances of transphobia and things like that. Again, we were an LGBTQ plus serving and mainly even run, organization. And that to me shows how important it is to have a general DEI team, outside of HR initiatives, in order to make sure that you are always working, and having inclusive policies and procedures, hearing everyone's, voices and experiences and concerns and needs, and so I came from that kind of extreme of not having that, and really never technically working anywhere that had a DEI department other than, little trainings I was doing, to this company that is very, very focused on DEI initiatives. I mean, it's like on our main web page, one of our main pages, there's even a video and stuff. And, it's a complete, you can see it's right in your face, the major differences in the culture. And so I think the importance and what that brings, and the kind of culture that creates, is that this company cares about everyone and wants to do right, by everyone. Nobody's perfect, right? But wants to do right, wants all of their employees to be supported. And who doesn't want to work for someone like that, And I think, unfortunately, in our society, that's not very common. You don't often hear of companies that people really feel like they're really taken care of, and really cared about, and that their voices matter. So I think that's very important. We in that, it's not just the team, it's bringing everyone to the table. It's giving people opportunities to participate in DEI things, initiatives, to have say in what programs we're bringing for specific recognition months, and subcommittees and things like that. So, we need to hear from more than the four of us that are that are on the broader team. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Creating those goals and having that DEI department in public can show employees how much you do care, and then putting the action behind it can be super important as well. Speaking of putting the action behind those things, as we're thinking about Pride this year, how is Unite Us honoring and celebrating Pride this year? Of course, recognizing that we should be supporting LGBTQI employees 365 days a year.
Absolutely. So we do support our LGBTQ plus employees 365 days a year. One of the ways that we do that is we have an LGBTQ plus ERG. It's called UBU, and that ERG, works on initiatives with the DEI team as well. We bring different speakers on different topics throughout the year for our DEI speaker series around LGBTQ plus inclusion as well. A lot of our team is very, in my experience, very LGBTQ plus friendly, very knowledgeable, whether they identify within the community or not. We do have a large LGBTQ plus population in our employees here at Unite Us. And then I was going to say something else. We do in our networks. I can't speak too much about this. I'm not too familiar with, and I haven't worked in the network in quite a while. But we have organizations that are in our networks who are, LGBTQ plus organizations or CBOs, and we help connect those clients to services that are unique and specific to their needs as LGBTQ plus individuals. And so with that, we're always increasing awareness and education on our CEMs or people who might be working with those users as well. And then specifically for what we're doing for Pride Month, we actually have our first committee meeting tomorrow for our June volunteer committee for the month of Pride. It is very difficult to get a group of 7 or 8 people together on the same day. So that was the earliest we were able to schedule it, but we usually get stuff planned and on the books pretty quickly. So I would say that's the main celebration or recognition month that we're focusing on this month. Although Juneteenth is equally is important, and we are trying to bring initiatives for around that day, although we do observe that day. So we're not working, the day after, because Juneteenth is on a Sunday this year. And so we'll be creating plans around that starting tomorrow. But I know our ERG, our LGBTQ plus ERG already has some plans to do a specific event. They're thinking of maybe doing something a little bit celebratory, maybe something a little bit, fun, like doing an Airbnb experience centered around Pride, or something kind of like that. Maybe a trivia. There was a couple ideas thrown out, so they're working on planning that as well. But we plan for it to be an exciting month, and we always have like a Zoom background, and we're working on that right now. So it's great to see. I know it needs to be more than that month, and it is, but it is great to see the support that we get during that month, and all the people that are happy to celebrate with us. And then one thing I forgot to mention is we do highly encourage everyone to use their pronouns, put their pronouns on their signatures if they use pronouns, in their Zoom, on their email signature, all of that in their Slack. And you do see that quite often here, which is very new for me to see that support and that utilized as much outside of an LGBTQ plus centered organization. So it's very enlightening. And I actually did a little lunch and learn last year during Pride Month. And in that lunch and learn, I was kind of sharing my experience and giving a little bit of like brief education around supporting the LGBTQ plus community, specifically trans individuals. And I had probably over a dozen, maybe 24 people reach out to me afterwards and just acknowledging their privilege and saying, thank you so much for mentioning why it's important to put my pronouns on. And they had changed it. They put their pronouns on and never used them before. And they literally stated to me, I just didn't think about it like that before. I just thought, it was obvious. I didn't realize it was this privilege I was holding, right? That everybody could just assume my pronouns correctly. And so I put them on there now, and I'm happy to support. And that was really cool. It made me feel like, they heard that. And, if you explain why that's important, people want to, support, and they want to help. I hate the word normalize, but make this routine, for in our society, because we're unfortunately pretty far from that, right? So that's something else we do that I love.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. And it's so nice whenever something that you do has such a big impact like that. I like to think that Pride Month is a really good place to build up some momentum. So get some excitement, build up that momentum, and then continue to use that for the year following as well. Very good call out around Juneteenth too. We do want to make sure that we're not racing that holiday and that we are celebrating it and recognizing it as well.
Absolutely.
So, Lucas, you did share with me previously that you're personally very passionate about this intersection between the LGBTQIA community and disability. What small changes have you seen make a big impact for organizations and individuals at that intersection?
Yeah, I think, I grew up in a very conservative area, in a very closed-minded area in a lot of ways. And I see this play out, the older that I get and the more involved I get in different communities and causes and, working in DEI. And what's very interesting to me is I feel in my experience that the conversation around accessibility, disability, inclusion is fairly new to DEI and is really important and really needs to be there. So, we really need to accentuate those conversations and have them more often. But I see, especially here in my work at Unite Us, a lot of overlap and a lot of people who, belong to both communities, which I've actually experienced in the past as well. And a lot of people, that I know who, identify within the LGBTQ plus community also either have, mental disabilities or cognitive disabilities or are neurodivergent. And, I see quite a bit of overlap over that. And I'm not a scientist. I don't know why, but there's been a lot of studies that have shown that as well. And I think it's important to make sure that we scratch that. I think that being a member of a marginalized community makes you think and understand and realize that you need to be advocating for everyone, and you realize, at least I have seen, my eyes are more open to other communities when you see that they're not really being seen or supported or necessarily at the table or the conversations that need to be had. And so I think that my experience in the past with working with that community and being passionate about that, and then becoming, a member of the LGBTQ plus community and really seeing that the adversities there, has really brought both of those topics to the forefront of these really need to be pushed more often in conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion, because I think we think a little bit too closed or a little, too small when we talk about DEI sometimes. And it really is everybody. I mean, it is such a variety of different identities and things, and really, about just making sure that there's equity across the board, for everyone. So my experience as a queer person who also has severe mental health issues and cognitive disabilities and severe ADHD and can't be treated for it has been challenging, but has also given me the, I guess, opportunity to learn how to advocate for myself and what I need. And I think that I learned that probably from doing it for other people, because I think most of us struggle with putting ourselves first and or advocating for ourselves. And so I've had to learn and grow, with that over the years, because I personally do have a much easier time advocating for someone else than for myself, even if it's for the same reasons. And so I think that that's helped me, be better about that and maybe get the resources and the care and support maybe that I needed, that I wasn't comfortable asking for in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's 3 really important call outs there. Number 1, there's room for everyone at the table. Number 2, advocate for everyone. You can advocate for different organizations, different groups of people. And then number 3 is advocate for yourself. When you can, learn from that, advocate for yourself, learn more how to speak up for yourself. And whenever you combine those 3 things, I think it can be really magical. So Lucas, final question here. Is there anything else that you want to share that I didn't ask, or any key insights that you hope listeners bring with them after listening to our podcast today?
I think, with everything going on in the world right now, this goes for anybody, but, I always kind of say this on the topic of when we're talking about trans identities, is that I think we often forget, some people forget that we're all human, and we're all just existing and living and trying to get through life on this, wild planet, right? And it's really important that, we sometimes just stop and take that in and think about that, because how you treat someone can go a long way, and how you see someone can go a long way. And I hate, seeing all this hate and all this violence. And it gets a little bit discouraging and disheartening of like, when are things going to change? But I think if we push that message more and just reminded people that no matter who you are, what your identity is, despite your differences, we're all here, living life, and we're all human, and we all deserve the same respect and the same, access and the same rights. And so I think that just can't be said enough. We have a long way to go with that, but I think it's important. And I always really push that, especially when we're talking about the trans community, because we so often feel misunderstood and ostracized. And so that's something I would like people to take away.
Wow, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for being on Reimagining Company Culture. And as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood. And we know that's a requirement for companies to succeed overall.